Our last family systems model focuses on Virginia Satir's approach, which is sometimes called communications humanistic family therapy. Her approach is part of the systemic school, which we've discussed for the past few weeks. Please take a look at the mind map to get an overview of what we'll cover in today's lesson. The current case review focuses on the Russ family from the therapy video this week. Please pause to read it and also make sure to view the therapy video as soon as possible. There are 3 central constructs to Satir's model: individual growth and development, communication, and self-esteem. The first construct involves genetic endowment and factoring in what is already part of our DNA as human beings. Our capacity for learning and what we've learned over our lifetimes is also important, as is the mind-body connection and recognizing what's called the primary survival triad, mother, father, and child, which is crucial to our concept of self. Also important are what Satir called the essential interacting parts within us: the physical, intellectual, emotion, interactional, contextual, nutritional, and spiritual aspects. How do all of these elements work together to make you the unique person that you are? The second central construct is communication, which Satir divided into 2 parts: incongruent communication and survival stances. Incongruent communication involves discrepancies between verbal and nonverbal cues. Think of a situation in which you felt one way on the inside, but demonstrated a different feeling to others. Another important aspect of incongruent communication is double-bind messages, in which the family member receives conflicting messages, each of which negates the other, making it difficult or even impossible to resolve the conflict. In the therapy video, which family member used double-bind messages when communicating? What impact did it have on other members of the family? The second aspect of communication, according to Satir, is survival stances, or protecting one's self-worth against perceived threats by others. Consider the 4 stances below. What are the survival stances of each family member? Now here's a more modern and humorous version of Satir's survival stances. Which of these stances are most applicable to you and to members of your family? Now the last central construct is self-esteem, which is the degree to which an individual values him or herself regardless of the opinions of others. All people possess the resources for positive growth. Discomfort and pain signal the need for change, and every person, thing, or situation is impacted by every other person, thing, or situation. In fact, Satir wrote her own declaration of self-esteem. Please pause the video to review. Let's move on to case conceptualization, and today we'll focus on Mrs. Russ from the video and conceptualize her from an intra-individual, interpersonal, and environmental macrosystemic standpoint. Although we don't have a lot of background on her, we can still make hypotheses about how she would fit into each of the tiers. For the intra-individual tier, we don't know a lot about her development in context, but can hypothesize that keeping her family together is an important aspect of her life. Her personality may be somewhat abrasive. She may become agitated easily and tends to blame others when problems occur. Regarding her cognitions, she may be somewhat concrete and have difficulty understanding the emotions and viewpoints of others. And although we don't have enough information for a diagnosis, she may continue to experience emotional problems related to her divorce, which have been stirred up as a result of Jacob's upcoming move from the home. Now, as part of the interpersonal tier, let's consider her family life cycle. Now, we don't know anything about her before her divorce 5 years ago, so one assumption would be that her emotional functioning could have become derailed around the time of the divorce, and this has impacted her relationship with both of her children. For parent-child relations, no information about early caregiver relationships, just that her current relational dynamics are maladaptive. Her family process represents enmeshed relationships with Jacob and Sarah in which boundaries are blurred. An example of this is she thinks of her son as the man of the house, and double bind messages, which are common. And at this time, we have no information on her social networks. Now, from an environmental macrosystemic perspective, we know that she is Caucasian, she may be middle class, but would need more information to corroborate this. Regarding her physical environment, she lives with her children, but we know nothing about her religion or employment history. As far as media, global aspects are concerned, we might consider societal views about divorce and divorced parents, and also the stigma that may still exist regarding people who engage in counseling for help. In class, we'll discuss the environmental macrosystemic tier as it applies to our own lives. Let's move on to the goals and interventions of Satir's model. There are 3 goals for improving communication within the family system, and they involve work on both an individual and collective level involving family members. Please pause the video to review these 3 goals. Also, how might achieving each of these goals benefit members of the Russ family? For the family to reach their goals, Satir proposed a number of interventions, and I'll discuss 5 of them now. The first is modeling communication, which involves using I statements and messages, and expressing thoughts and feelings directly, and not stating or predicting what others may be thinking or feeling. When considering the Satir therapy video, how did Dr. Chang encourage family members to model communication with each other? Now, the next intervention is family sculpting, which all of us should be familiar with from our recent class exercise in which students sculpted their family dynamics. Now, the third intervention is the self-mandala, which assesses clients' resources, abilities, and challenges in the 8 areas mentioned in the circle. Here's a worksheet to use with family members to help them assess their abilities in each of these domains. Now, the next intervention is called the parts party, and this involves acknowledging and describing the good and bad parts of each individual and ultimately integrating these parts into a more unified whole. For example, it might involve recognizing one's people-pleasing persona, sarcastic tendencies, know-it-all behaviors, as well as the joyful aspects of the self, and bringing them together in a unified way. The last intervention I'll discuss is transforming rules, which involves directly changing the way family members speak with one another. Replacing should with can and never with sometimes, this gives family members a way to utilize language in a way that promotes more positive communication. Now, the cultural implications listed here are actually based on research involving all 4 of the systems therapy models and not just Satir's. Pause the video to consider how therapists can celebrate values of the family issues of diversity, and client worldviews when conducting therapy from a systemic vantage point. Have a great week.